Named Gerald Harbach. Went in the service 1952. I spent 3 years in the National Guard. I joined the same year I graduated from high school, 1947. Joined the Guard for a 3-year hitch. At the end of 3 years, I signed up for my second hitch. I signed up for another 3 years. 1 year into the 3-year hitch, they called our guard up, and I was married in 1948, October. We had a daughter in 1950, and they called us up in 1952. I went into the active service, 1952, went to leadership school, weapons school, and in the Guard I made the rank of staff sergeant. And after going to school, I went out to California to train with the 44th Division, and I got orders to go to Korea. VCOM, they called it. They flew me, and there was one other regular Army sergeant, staff sergeant from World War II, was the only one that I knew. They flew us to Korea, and we both went to the 3rd Division. He went to Fox Company, 3rd Division, and I went to George Company, 3rd Division, 2nd Battalion, 15th Regiment. He became platoon sergeant of weapons platoon of Fox Company, and I became platoon sergeant of weapons platoon of George Company. They were short of non-coms. They had been fighting for outpost, or it was a Kelly. A mountaintop in Kelly had a lot of casualties. 4th platoon was being ran by a corporal at that time, and I came into the company 3 o'clock at night. There was 19 sergeants, staff sergeants, came into the company about the same that evening, and corporal came up to me and said, "I hear you got a weapons MOS," and I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "We're glad to see you." And he says, "I'm 4th platoon sergeant." I thought, right away, I thought, he's a corporal and he's 4th platoon sergeant. That don't sound good. Which means they had a lot of casualties. So anyway, we were pulling Outpost Tom. And from Tom, we would daily go into Jackson Heights, was a mountain in the Chorwine Valley. And that went on for about a month, and then we was on the MLR, and we had Outpost Dick was just a platoon-sized outpost. Outpost Tom was a 2-platoon-sized outpost. We contacted the enemy, had modest casualties from time to time. On Outpost Tom, the first day of December 1952 was the first we went on Outpost Tom, and we went out in the rain, got soaking wet. The rain turned to snow, had about a foot of snow, and by morning it was 0, and the clothes were freezing on we were real cold. Anyway, the man I relieved on Outpost Tom, he was from King Company, and he told me, "Well, we got an LP out here, 2-man LP for warning," and the Chinese started shelling the OP because there was too many people on the OP, and they knew that. They knew that we were changing the OP, so they start dropping mortar rounds in, and I shake hands with him, and I slide in my bunker. A round come in and killed him. And then his men were trying to get the body out of there and so on. Well, that for 5 days and 5 nights, the only sleeping we did on OP Tom was standing up because for fear of freezing in the zero weather. We hadn't had any winter clothes yet. While we were relieved at that point then, and we got our winter clothes, and we moved to the main line of resistance, we call it the MLR, and there was an outpost Harry, and that was 900 yards out, which is a long ways out for an outpost, but it was the highest point. It makes it very valuable for calling artillery fire and so forth in because of the height and readjusting your artillery fire. So anyway, the outpost Harry had a lot of bad bunkers. They had a lot of bunkers that were blowing up. There was a lot of men in the 7th Division had been buried in those bad bunkers when they blew them up. The Chinese threw bunker bombs in and blew them up. So our company got the outpost, and we were rebuilding bunkers up there. And we was up there about a month, building bunkers and making very good bunkers. They bought new lumber up to us. 2x10s of June. And lost half of our company. In April, we had lost about 40% of our company. And fought hand to hand. And artillery fire, we called our own artillery fire in on us again to save. And our own artillery fire, if you wasn't in a bunker, you were dead. And the Chinese they said on the night we was there, the 13th, that all night long, the Chinese supposedly lost 3,000 men. I don't know. I don't know who counted the bodies. But anyway, that went on for 8 nights straight. We didn't have a company left anymore. We left the line for we got some new men and things progressed, and there was another big push in the Kumau Valley, and we got moved into the Kumau Valley, and the Chinese army, 2 Chinese armies overran, that's 200,000 Chinese overran 3 divisions of rock soldiers, which there's about less than 20,000 to a division, so 200,000 Chinese overran around 50,000 rocks, so we got thrown into that hole. So, and this was just before the end of the war. So this was in July. The war ended the 27th of July, and just fighting back and forth and the seesawing, and we'd gain a little, and we just tried to hold the line. And that night the Chinese armies overran. They went 27 miles in one night, which we was in the rear areas at that time. And on the 27th, they signed an armistice, and at noon, all the fighting was supposed to stop, and everybody was supposed to back off 50 kilometers, and which we did. We was in heavy mountains, and we backed off, and the Chinese didn't want to move too much ammo, and they were shot off a lot of their artillery ammo, and we shot off a lot of ours, so they didn't have to move it, and the war ended at noon on the 27th of July. And I had enough points to go home, and in 2 weeks I was on a ship on the way home with I had earlier, I had another stripe. I became staff sergeant in January it was, or became a sergeant first class, and I was put in for master sergeant, but I Was put in for that twice, but that never came down until I went home and got discharged. Yeah. So that's sort of a quick synopsis of the Korean War. Thanking me for I appreciate that. Freedom's not free is a favorite saying of the Korean veterans. And we need to protect our freedom, and the attitude is too much government is not a good thing. We're government's trying to run too much. It's just capitalism and free enterprise built our nation, and that's what we were fighting for, and that's what World War II was about. And freedom is free people do a lot better than people who got to toe the mark and you can't do this, you can't do that, and regulations, and we don't need all that stuff. Capitalism or free enterprise, whatever you want to call it either one. Free enterprise pays off. And I'm an old man, and I had my own business for, I spent 6 years with the National Guard and 2 years with active service. And I became a farmer and raised 4 kids. And I got 15 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren, and got a family, and I want a better place for them to live. I want them to have it better than I had it. Well, I enjoyed the children who thanked us for our service in letters that we got, because I think that sowing the seeds of respect for our nation, and the seeds are important. Patriotism is important. You don't always do what you wish to do. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do, and patriotism is part of that. And the nation, if you don't have pride in who you are and what you are, you won't probably be very. It's nice to have things to brag about, isn't it? Yeah. My wife wrote me regular, and we had a daughter while I was overseas, and I had more close calls than I had fingers. I stood beside guys when they died, and I had more close calls than I got fingers, and I just thank God's blessings that I came home in one piece. And you know, you sort of wonder when you knew a lot of guys didn't come home in one piece. We seem. And one thing about the South Koreans, that was the end of the spread of communism, which was a big blessing to the South Koreans. And the South Koreans are grateful. I've had a lot of South Koreans come up in different places we've been and shake my hand and thank me for the Korean War and for me fighting for them, and they're grateful. And some of our places we've been, they don't sound too grateful. And it's pretty hard to save somebody that don't want to save themselves. And I think that's very important. If they don't want us there, if we aren't wanted, why should we be there? Appreciate, you know, we don't want our military to get weak. We need to maintain our military. Maybe it don't possibly don't have to be as big as some people would like it, but it needs to be big enough to do the job. And certainly got some fabulous weapons, and that takes tax money to do that. So they've done a real good. I wished I had some of those weapons that in combat. There's some of that stuff was fabulous. It certainly would have made the fighting easier and would have saved lives too. Yeah, because they respect many places, many foreign warriors respect power. They don't respect weakness. They look down on weakness as they'll take advantage of weakness, and they are afraid of power, and maybe that's not too bad a way to be. It's okay to be, be friendly, be cooperative, but not weak.